a bit of a better mood to talk about Jurgen Klopp. It says here he's been moaning about Saudi Arabia. No, I think he's raised an interesting point, actually, because the Liverpool boss says it's not helpful that the transfer window is going to be open for nearly 3 weeks longer in Saudi Arabia than it is in Europe. The transfer deadline in Europe, 1st of September. According to FIFA, Saudi Arabia's runs until the 20th of September. Klopp says it is massive in this moment. Pretty much the worst thing, I think, is that the transfer window in Saudi Arabia is open 3 weeks longer. Now, Liverpool have already sold a couple of players to Saudi Arabia in the shape of Fabinho and Jordan Henderson. But I don't think this is about... People say, oh, you're a hypocrite. Liverpool took money from Saudi Arabia. I don't think he's got an issue with Saudi Arabia buying players from the Premier League. He's just talking here about the fact that, and maybe he's slightly frustrated in his pursuit of Romeo Lavia from Southampton, in that clubs can hold out for more money from elsewhere, not just now until the end of our transfer window in Europe, but beyond it. They can say, do you know what, I don't have to accept an offer from you because ultimately I can wait another 2 weeks and my player can still be sold for big money to Saudi Arabia. And it kind of, it puts the Premier League behind other teams. Often we've argued that the transfer window should be before the start of the season. And we tried it. And what happened? Teams from Europe were able to buy players from the Premier League, and then Premier League sides couldn't replace them. And essentially, they could be in that position once again this year.
Yeah, I think Klopp actually raises a very good point. I think there is an unfairness to the way that it is at the moment. I think that there is an issue, and it's incredibly problematic for teams who can't really plan for a season. You know, this... And do you know, often these rules, I feel like they are for the furtherance of the bigger teams who have a bigger squad. You know, a smaller club who are maybe more heavily reliant on a particular player. If they then lose that player late in the window, there is nothing they can do. They can't make it work. So I do think that something needs to be looked at here, because overall, having transfer window closing at a different time in various different territories is a problem. I don't know if we need a universal rule where maybe you say that by the opening day of the season, which is tomorrow, isn't it? Maybe the transfer window should close in terms of business in and out of Premier League teams tonight.
I think it's difficult because even across Europe, we have certain leagues that start at different times. Russia, for example, I don't know exactly what the situation is with their league, but, you know, famously...
generally start at different times.
Generally, we would get to sort of Champions League qualifiers in August and they hadn't played a game in months. In certain parts of Scandinavia, for example, different league seasons. So what do? Does their window suddenly open in the middle of their league? I don't think that would be fair on them. So you need separate transfer windows, or
no window whatsoever.
No window at all.
No window at all.
Yeah.
Although the problem is, again, that is heavily in favour of the big clubs, because what happens is, in that situation, look, do you know what I just thought there, Hugh? You could end up genuinely with a situation where some of the bigger, more lavish football clubs would have the ability, the financial purchase, to buy a player for a specific game. They would be able to do that, wouldn't they?
Yeah. Well, we had, an open market previously, before the window came in. And what would happen is you would see the financial might of certain clubs who may have been struggling or had the goal of reaching a title, pop up and say, this player scored 20 goals already by Christmas. We're just going to buy them. They're going to fire us to the title.
It would get all tactical as well. You could potentially sell players to teams that are playing your rival. It would create a whole new world of issues. So no, I think you need a window. I think it needs to be closed, because otherwise the amount of scope for manipulation of the league, particularly for those with deep pockets, is terrifying.
I wonder if Jurgen Klopp knows what he's stumbling into, though.
But Klopp's point is correct. There just isn't a solution.
Exactly. If you ask Saudi Arabia to align with Europe, Saudi Arabia can turn around and say, so
we want to play in the Champions League then?
Are we European?
Yeah.
Are we UEFA now?
Yeah.
And if we're under UEFA, do we get into the Champions League?
And they'd be able to argue that one, because I think when people say Europe, the natural thing to do is go geographical. So therefore you can't play in Europe because geography determines Europe. But then they would easily be able to argue, well, Israeli sides, for example, aren't geographically in Europe, and yet they can compete in European competition.
Exactly.
So that's what's going to happen.
You're now convinced it will happen.
Hang on, this is what's going to happen. This is the ultimate. Al Hilal are destined to play in the Champions League. Do you not think that is the ultimate end of this conversation.
I do, but not for the transfer.
Not concerning the reasons though. This is one of many reasons why this is how it will end.
I think we are going to be looking at a model in terms of, certainly European football that includes whichever teams in the world have the most money. We're going to be looking at a competition where essentially if you're the richest club in the world, you get into it. If you're able to sign the best players and you have the most money, you're going to be getting into the competition.
Do you know what you've just spelt out using different terminology? You've just spelt out the Super League.
Yeah.
This is the Super League in a different guise, isn't it? This is the Super League that... Do you remember when we valiantly went onto the streets of the Fulham Road? Well, I went onto the streets of the Fulham Road and fans all around the country went to their stadiums and protested and we won. There was a moment of euphoria on the Fulham Road. I was there. Weirdly, do you know that day I had an argument with Petr Cech?
Did you?
I did. He was very angry and very animated. And there's an image of me sort of... You can hear me saying, "Where is your principal, Petr?"
Really?
Yeah, genuinely.
We'll get into the details of that in a few moments' time.
But you know the euphoria that the news spread on the Fulham Road while I was stood there. It broke on the night, and Chelsea pulled out. And there was scenes as if we'd won the European Cup. People spraying champagne, genuine celebration. And ultimately, it was just a delay tactic, wasn't it? Do you remember? Because at the time we thought that UEFA were the good guys. We'd kind of sided with UEFA, and then a few weeks later, Champions League tickets. Chelsea were in the Champions League final. The ticket prices were through the roof, and we were back to square one.
I believe that sooner rather than later, you'll see all the biggest brands in world football in one competition. Where it will be played, how it will be structured, I'm not sure. But I think the power now lies with the state-backed clubs, the ones that are financed by huge American venture capitalists and hedge funds, and they will create a competition.
Well, the spirit of the 39th game has been resurrected, hasn't it? Playing a particular game abroad in different territories. That's.
I just think we're already termed as legacy fans, but I think there will be two types of football in the future. There will be the franchised NFL version of European soccer, if you like, which will have AC Milan, who haven't been great for the last 5-10 years, or they get in because they've won this many European Cups, etc., and then essentially they'll build a competition around the Juventuses of this world, whether they've been good or not, and Manchester United, and so far and so on after that, and then essentially
it's hateful, isn't it?
The rest of us will watch what we consider to be real or normal football, and it will be segregated.
Sadly, do you know what is incredibly painful here? Every word that you said tortured my soul, and yet I agree with every word
Chelsea,
you said.
Don't worry, Chelsea are going to be in the breakaway, mate. You'll be fine.
I mean, I won't be there. Would you? Obviously, you're a devoted Manchester United fan. Would you support Manchester United in a different?
No, I don't think any Manchester United fan would.
Do you really believe that?
No true Manchester United fan would. I was about to say our only problem is we have hundreds of millions of supporters all over the world, many of whom would. I think in this country, with the growing up with the pyramid that we have, and understanding how football, I hate to be all, England is better than everywhere else on this, but I do think the pyramid here in this country is so strong and the clubs mean so much to fans in general. I'm a Manchester United supporter, but I don't want to see any club in this country go to the wall. I don't want to see fans in this country angry with their board or anything like that. I just want us all to go out there on a Saturday, put the best 11 out, may the best team win. And then, if it goes on forever, it goes on forever. At this point in time, we're still interested in it.
But it's happening, and it's happening at my club in a terrifying way. It really is. It's awful. The way that, you mentioned legacy fans there. The way that fans are seen and almost derided for being that committed. Fans, there's a desire. I saw something really, really terrifying. I think this was at Newcastle United. In order to stop the monopoly, I suppose you would call it, on fans getting tickets for away games, they were talking about potentially saying that you can only have a certain amount. So you can go to a maximum of 5 or 6 or 7 away games, and that way you can spread it around. You think, hang on a minute, what you're doing there is you're penalising the most committed. At Chelsea, do you know what they're doing? They've brought in this ridiculous rule where under-16s need to be accompanied by an adult. I saw
this, and there are safeguarding reasons for that.
This is a terrible.
But there
terrible
are,
strategy.
you can understand safeguarding reasons for that.
What's this? I went to football on my own when I was under 16.
The world is a very different and scary place for many people.
Absolutely, but this isn't the answer. The world has always been a scary place for people, I think. And the fact that you are now effectively pricing out and legally barring a generation of football supporters. Like, I think this is what we are doing here is we are sanitising football stadiums beyond recognition. And what football clubs are, and what football clubs are supposed to represent, they are institutions, they are beacons of their community, they are rites of passages for people to go and show pride in their team. And it's being totally eroded, all for the sake of a dollar bill, yo.
Well, listen, a lot of fans across the world will say the Premier League kind of started it moving in that direction and have a de facto Super League already. You know, that's the counter-argument to this. The huge money in sums that we're seeing in football.
But I hate that. I think it's true.
We've inflated the market.
No, we do this. I mean, our clubs are responsible for this. Chelsea have definitely done it recently. I mean, do you know what my example is? And don't get me wrong, Hugh, this isn't me picking on Manchester United because you're here. But do you know what really did chime with just my disliking of modern football? You know when Manchester United went and signed Anthony and admitted that he was too expensive, admitted that he was more than they wanted to pay, but effectively just went and paid it anyway because they know that they have the money, because they know that they've got all of the TV money that comes. Yeah. Like Chelsea have done. That's just my example. But you know the way that Premier League clubs sort of launch ourselves into Europe and spray our disgusting cash everywhere and just nick the best from Europe, play a bit, and then go and do it again the next transfer window, do it again the next transfer window.
And that's the thing about what Jurgen Klopp's saying about the window and stuff, that I kind of, it doesn't fit nicely with me, because you think of clubs like Liverpool and all the big clubs in England, and you think about the amount of talent that they have who we rarely get to see on a football pitch, because they are able to amass a squad of the Premier League 25 plus another dozen who are more than good enough to be playing in the league. But, you know, we just keep them there in case we get a couple of injuries. We need them to play a half a dozen games. Yeah.
It's really troubling. Do you know, I think Ruud van Nistelrooy was at PSV, wasn't he, recently?
Yeah.
And he had built a very exciting team. And in that, in the transfer window, you know, they were building something really exciting. It was all going very well for them. And then in one transfer window, bang, they lost the two forwards. It was Noni Madueke came to Chelsea, and then whoever he was playing up front with is
Cody Gakpo.
Suddenly, so PSV have built this really exciting team. Van Nistelrooy is really enjoying it. He's really excited, and PSV, you know, big club, are on the cusp of something special. One transfer window, two English clubs. Suddenly, they're back to square one. And yeah, okay, they've got a lot of money for that, but it's almost irrelevant how much money you've got, because you're creating and you're producing diamonds.
Well, football's changed. I mean, across the continent, there'd be maybe a couple of really big, wealthy clubs in each country, and they would go and slog it out in the Champions League. And each individual domestic league, people would try and keep up with them. But you'd see clubs in Eastern Europe or France, you know, getting to Champions League finals.
Yeah, Shevchenko and Rebrov and all that.
Winning European Cups, and it was absolutely fantastic. Yeah. Maybe we should do away with the January transfer window, which, you know, stops teams from having a fantastic season come May. But ultimately, all of those big clubs are concentrated now in one territory, which is essentially here with a handful, half a dozen on Europe, who are able to compete with English clubs. So if we're going to do something about it, and we really mean it, it means kind of dismantling the power of the Premier League.
I'm all in favour. Fight the power.
That's okay. All right. Well, we found an activist in the studio tonight in the shape of Rory Jennings. Todd Bowley doesn't want your money. Stop signing people.